The previous video mapped the complete backstuga food survival system. 4 preservation methods, 3 production layers, 0 purchased energy. A food architecture so redundant that no single failure could starve a family through a Scandinavian winter. But a food system is only as nutritionally remarkable as the people who understood how to run it, and the people who ran this one left a physical food record more specific and more nutritionally revealing than anything the written history of early modern Sweden chose to preserve. This video puts the people into the food picture. Who the backstugitare actually were, what their food production reality looked like on the ground, what they ate on a Tuesday in February when the temperature outside was -12 and the potato pit was half empty, and what the physical evidence recovered from excavated cooking vessels, skeletal remains, and parish records says about the nutritional quality of a diet that history chose not to record. The backstugitare left almost nothing behind in writing, not because they had nothing to say about food, because the people who controlled writing in early modern Sweden did not consider the backstugitare's food life worth documenting. What we know about what they ate we know from what they left in the ground, and the ground kept better food records than the scribes did. The backstugitare's food production capacity was determined entirely by their legal status, and their legal status was the lowest available in rural Swedish society. Defined as a class below the torpare, tenant farmers who had leases, contracts, and recognized places in the rural food economy, the backstugitares occupied marginal land by informal tolerance rather than legal agreement. That tolerance was the difference between having a kitchen garden and having no food production ground at all. They paid no property tax because they owned no property. Parish records captured their deaths and baptisms, but not what they ate, how they preserved it, or what their daily food survival actually cost them. That distinction matters enormously for the food history record. Most backstugitares had some form of kitchen garden because it cost the landowner nothing and reduced the likelihood that a hungry family on their land would become a drain on parish charity. A family growing their own food was not the landowner's problem, so the garden was generally permitted by self-interested tolerance rather than generosity. That tolerance was the foundation of the entire backstugitare food year. The potato plot was the caloric foundation of the backstugitare food year. Potatoes produced more calories per square meter than any other crop available in Scandinavian growing conditions. A well-managed south-facing potato plot of even modest size could produce enough caloric density to sustain a family through 6 months of Scandinavian winter if the harvest reached full starch maturity and the storage was managed correctly through the earth contact preservation system the backstuga provided. Everything surrounding the potato plot was nutritional support. Most backstugitares kept a few chickens for eggs, a consistent protein and fat source available through the warmer months, with laying slowing significantly in the coldest months and leaving the household dependent on other preserved protein sources through the depth of winter. Some kept a goat for milk. Goats are browsers rather than grazers. They extract nutrition from woody shrubs, rough vegetation, and rocky terrain that would starve a cow requiring open pasture and significant grain supplementation. A goat on marginal land that a cow could not survive on was the backstugitare's dairy food infrastructure, producing milk consumed fresh in summer and fermented into long-lasting dairy products through winter. The goat was not a luxury, it was a precision nutritional strategy for obtaining fat and protein from ground that produced nothing else of food value. Seasonal harvest labor provided additional food access, a portion of harvest wages paid in kind rather than cash, giving the backstugitare family grain, dried legumes, or preserved foods that their small plot could not produce. This combination, kitchen garden, chickens, sometimes a goat, and harvest labor food wages, was the complete annual food production picture for most backstugitare families. Now here is where the physical food record becomes more valuable than anything a scribe wrote down. Archaeological excavation of northern European peasant dwelling sites from the same period, including Swedish rural laboring class sites, has recovered cooking vessel residue, food storage pit contents, and faunal remains that tell a specific story about what the backstugitare actually ate, rather than what contemporary observers assumed they ate. The cooking vessel residue tells the first part of the food story. Analysis of clay pot interiors from Swedish rural laboring class sites shows consistent evidence of long-cooked grain and root vegetable mixtures, the Swedish equivalent called gröt in its grain form. This was not occasional food. The residue patterns in excavated vessels suggest daily preparation, the same clay pot, the same fire, the same long, slow cook that extracted maximum nutrition from minimum ingredients. On days when grain had been soaked or partially fermented before cooking, a practice that food science confirms reduces phytic acid content and increases mineral bioavailability, the daily gröt delivered significantly more nutritional value than the same grain cooked quickly without preparation. The faunal remains tell the second part of the food story. Bone assemblages from Swedish rural laboring class sites show a consistent pattern. Fish bones are abundant. Dried and salted fish was the primary animal protein source, accessible through coastal trade and inland river fishing. Pig bones are present but sparse. Cattle bones are nearly absent. Beef was a landowner's food, not a backstugitare's food. Chicken bones appear consistently, eggs and occasional meat from the household flock completing the protein picture. The most revealing part of the physical food record comes from dental analysis of skeletal remains from Swedish rural laboring class populations of the backstugitare period. The dental wear patterns show consistently high dietary fiber consumption, the kind of wear produced by a diet built primarily around coarse grain, root vegetables, and fermented foods, rather than refined carbohydrates or soft processed foods. The cavity rates in these remains are significantly lower than those found in skeletal remains from contemporaneous urban and upper-class Swedish populations whose diets included more refined grain and sugar. The backstugitare's teeth were doing more work than a wealthy Swede's teeth, and they were lasting longer because of it. The nutritional constraint that poverty imposed on the backstugitare food system was, by the measure of dental health, protecting them from the dietary damage that refined food was inflicting on the populations above them in the social hierarchy. Now put all of that fruit evidence together into a single winter day inside a backstuga in February. The temperature outside is minus 12 degrees Celsius. The fire, banked with ash the night before, still holds heat in its coals. The single room is above freezing. The potato pit dug into the earth floor is half empty. It is February and the autumn harvest was 4 months ago. The fermentation pot sitting in the coolest earth contact corner of the room produces its low, sharp, acidic smell. The smell that means the bacterial culture is active, the food inside it is alive, and the winter food supply is holding. Breakfast is gröt, a thick porridge of coarse grain cooked slow in the clay pot over the rebuilt fire. By February, many backstugitare households would be managing on fermented dairy products made from the previous autumn's milk rather than fresh supply. A small amount of fermented whey going into the porridge in place of fresh milk, adding lactic acid bacteria and bioavailable minerals to the morning food supply. The midday meal is the fermentation pot. Fermented turnips or fermented cabbage served alongside dried fish rehydrated near the fire. The fish provides complete protein and omega-3 fatty acids, nutrients critically important for populations living at northern latitudes through sunless winters, where vitamin D synthesis from sunlight is impossible for months at a time. The fermented vegetables provide the probiotic bacterial cultures, synthesized B vitamins, and bioavailable minerals that a diet of stored root vegetables and grain alone could not supply through 6 months of limited food variety. This combination was not a poverty meal. It was a precision nutritional strategy refined through generations of understanding what a human body required to remain healthy through a Scandinavian winter. The omega-3 fatty acids supported immune function during months of minimum sunlight. The B vitamins supported neurological function when fresh food was unavailable. The probiotic cultures maintained gut microbiome diversity through months of dietary monotony. The evening meal returned to the clay pot. Root vegetables from the earth pit cooked with whatever remained from midday, thickened with grain, eaten by firelight while the earth walls held the food preservation temperature steady outside. That was a winter Tuesday. Not romantic, not dramatic. Precise, repetitive, and nutritionally sufficient in ways the people eating it never had scientific language to describe, but their bodies understood completely across 300 years of Scandinavian survival. Here is what modern nutritional science says about that diet, and here is the verdict this series has been building toward. The lacto-fermented vegetables and dried fish that formed the core of the backstugitare winter food supply provided a nutritional profile that contemporary gut health research identifies as beneficial for gut microbiome diversity and immune function. The cool, stable earth temperature conditions of the backstuga interior drove slower fermentation that produced broader bacterial diversity and more complex B vitamin synthesis than the faster room temperature fermentation a modern kitchen produces. The high-fiber grain and root vegetable base maintained consistent blood sugar across the day. No spike from refined carbohydrates, no crash from sugar, no mid-morning energy depletion. The backstugitare were not eating well by choice. They were eating well by constraint. On the specific nutritional markers the physical evidence can measure, dental health, dietary fiber intake, fermented food bacterial diversity, and omega-3 fatty acid supply, their constrained diet outperformed the diets of wealthier contemporaries eating refined food. Sweden's Landless poor built a food preservation and transformation system from nothing that outperformed modern refrigeration on temperature consistency, outperformed the premium fermentation food industry on bacterial diversity and B vitamin synthesis, and sustained families through 6 months of Scandinavian winter with no single point of failure.
That system was not replaced because something nutritionally superior took its place. It was replaced because the industrial economy needed consumers rather than self-sufficient food producers. A zero-cost, four-method food survival system with no mechanical components and no energy input was commercially inconvenient, so it was forgotten. Swedish records documented approximately 22,658 backstuga still standing in 1910, and then removed the category from official records entirely, as though 50,000 homes and the food knowledge inside them had never existed. A refrigerator was plugged in and called progress. The food science says otherwise. The dental remains of the backstugitare say otherwise. The nutritional research on earth temperature storage, cool fermentation conditions, and four-method food preservation redundancy says otherwise. And now you have that science. The backstuga is one answer to one food question that most people never thought to ask. What did the modern food system replace, and did the replacement actually serve the people eating from it, or the industries selling to them? That question does not end with the backstuga. It applies to every food practice, every preservation method, every dietary tradition the modern food system declared inconvenient, primitive, or obsolete, and replaced with something more profitable. Before you leave, one food comparison I want you to sit with honestly. The backstugitare had no food choices. Fermented vegetables, dried fish, grain porridge, earth-stored root vegetables. That was the complete winter food menu, repeated daily for 6 months, every year, with no mechanical supermarket to fall back on, no refrigerator to bail them out, and no single point of failure that one power outage could destroy. You have unlimited food choice. Every refined product, every processed convenience, every nutritionally depleted item the modern food industry has engineered to be more palatable and less nourishing than what came before it is available to you at any hour of any day. And yet, the bones and teeth of the people with no choices outperform the nutritional markers of the people above them who had every choice available. If you were forced to eat only what a backstugitare family ate through a Scandinavian winter, fermented vegetables, dried fish, grain porridge, and earth-stored root vegetables for 30 days, do you think you would feel better or worse than you do right now on your current diet? Drop your honest answer in the comments, not the answer you would give to impress someone, the real one. This channel exists to ask the food question the modern food industry spends significant money preventing from being asked at scale. One food subject at a time, with the evidence standard, the nutritional argument, and the refusal to accept the food industry's version of progress as the final word. If these 3 videos changed how you think about the food you store, the fermented products you buy, or the refrigerator you depend on, subscribe now, like this video, and share it with one person who has never once questioned whether the modern food system upgraded what came before it, or simply replaced it with something more profitable. That person does not need a lecture. They need 3 videos and the evidence to form their own conclusion. The backstuga is behind us. The next food truth this channel uncovers will prove the same thing about a different food, a different civilization, and a different industry that needs you not to know. Subscribe and be there when it arrives.